This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning. We also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 28th of April 2020, and I am Miss K.
I'm Tuam.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. In the Daily Nation, woman of firsts. In the Standard, Madam CJ, how she beat the odds. And in the Star, how the new land system will affect you, and other stories. A good one, but poorly rendered.
Very
now,
poorly.
Before we tackle the stories of the day, congratulations to our, what do you call it? When somebody's about to take office.
Yes.
They're just about to,
CJ in waiting.
Yeah, our CJ in waiting. This is an exciting time for Kenya. We are supporting the new Madam CJ.
Oh yes,
100%.
Absolutely.
Please kick us off, Ms. K.
As reported and as stated very clearly by JM today, two of our headlines have reported that the Judicial Service Commission has recommended Lady Justice Martha Koome for appointment to the position of CJ and has forwarded her name to Parliament for vetting. I have two things to say about this. First, and as we have said, I am very happy that for the first time in our history as a country, we will have a woman as Chief Justice. And as a lawyer of the same gender, I am glad that that particular glass ceiling has finally been broken.
Yeah, and also, as Professor Motahi Nguni reminded us, she is a project of the Fort Hall School of Government.
Oh,
very
absolutely.
true. She is. We have worked with her very well in the past. And I think that the next thing we should also have are more projects of our own, and a woman as the AG and the Solicitor General. But I think that for Justice Koome, with her experience as a judge of the Court of Appeal, she'll make a strong and grounded decisions in the Supreme Court. And also, because she's young, I think she'll be the first CJ to retire and remain on the bench.
Absolutely.
I think we'll have a very interesting power play there in the future. It'll be interesting to watch. Second, and this is my most important point here, it is possible, and I could be wrong, but it is possible that the revisit on the judiciary is finally complete. And could it be that with the appointment of a woman as CJ, Justice Mwilu will be replaced as the Deputy Chief Justice by a man? And while there is no law that preserves the position of CJ or DCJ for either gender, the practice in the judiciary has been, for those two positions, that they are held by members of the opposite gender. So when Willie Mutunga was appointed as CJ, Nancy Baraza was appointed as DCJ. When Maraga was appointed as CJ, Mwilu was appointed as DCJ.
That's right.
Now Martha Koome, it's true, it is a practice, has been recommended for the appointment as CJ. Wouldn't it then follow that a man should deputize her? And they say that the best strategy is the obvious strategy, and in my view, using this strategy of practice of having people of opposite genders in the leading positions in the judiciary, this strategy to reorganize the Supreme Court is a no-brainer.
A no-brainer, indeed.
You know, Ms. K, it's a great thing. Tanzania has its first woman president. Kenya will have its first CJ woman. First woman Chief Justice. And I think, I don't know about Uganda, what Uganda will have soon. But anyway, maybe first lady. Oh, I don't know.
What?
We have always said that Uhuru Kenyatta will have the last say on what happens on Kenya's political chessboard. And in controlling the chessboard, we hypothesize three things that are of most importance to him from a political perspective. The first is his own succession. Second is BBI. And third has to do with the dissolution of Parliament. These three variables are unrelated at first glance, but all have something in common. They all require two institutions, the judiciary and the IBC, to make them work. And if Uhuru Kenyatta is a grandmaster in chess, and we believe he is, he has lined up his pawns, his bishops, his knights, in a way that some chicken sellers have no idea of what's about to happen. And we say this because in 1 week, three major things have happened. One, Uhuru appointed a 7-member panel to interview candidates for the 4 vacant IBC commissioner positions. Two, the JSC has named Martha Koome the new nominee for Chief Justice. And three, both houses of Parliament will conclude a special sitting of BBI by the end of this week. The question herein is, so what? What advantage does it give to Uhuru? We will answer these questions by asking the following. 1. If Maraga did what he did in 2017, do you think Uhuru Kenyatta wants any surprises?
No.
Do you think Uhuru would swear in a rogue CJ like Maraga ever again?
Never.
2. If Chebukati has sided with RUTO to sabotage BBI, do you think Uhuru trusts him to oversee a referendum? And 3. If it was up to Philomena Mwilu to decide on what the solution of parliament means, don't you think she would say the president and parliament both go home? Absolutely. After all, wasn't she part of the cabal that cancelled the whole presidential election in 2017? Good people, what Uhuru has done this week is called leverage, institutional leverage. When the other man in Karen is meeting acrobats, Uhuru has been scheming. And my oh my, what a game we have in front of us.
Indeed, indeed, absolutely. You know, I said in Sagana, I kept telling people, Uhuru Kenyatta will have the last laugh. And we haven't even seen, the half of it.
Absolutely.
He will have the last laugh.
Yeah.
Now, yesterday, I hypothesized that there will be no election in 2022 because a state of war and a state of emergency could be declared. But do we have a crisis, you may ask? Well, yes, we do.
Yeah.
We are confronting the worst health crisis in the history of our country. The president, during his 10th COVID-19 address, pronounced himself on this matter. And he said, and I quote, "The harsh reality is that we are at war with an invisible, ruthless, and relentless enemy.
Yeah.
Indeed, one only needs to look at how this virus is currently ravaging India and Brazil. It is a state of war.
Absolutely.
But there is also a second theater of war,
Yeah.
one that is just as important for Project Kenya. This is the succession crisis, the
Yes.
succession war, the
Yes.
war of succession.
Yes.
And this war is not to be belittled. Kenyans out there are thinking, COVID is not as, this war of succession is not as important as the war on COVID. They're both as important. It is a war with monumental consequences for our future.
Yeah.
It's a contest for the heart and soul of our nation.
Yeah.
Who will lead us when Uhuru leaves office?
Yes.
You see, Uhuru and Raila are in a desperate fight to redeem the soul of our nation.
Yeah.
And they are at war with William Ruto, who wants to sink the soul of our nation into deeper depths of wickedness.
Yes.
Uhuru and Raila want to set this nation on a path of course correction as far as politics is concerned. And that is why BBI remains a priority. Liwe liwalo. Lazima tupitishe hii kitu. Now, these two wars will necessitate the postponement of the August 22 elections to buy us more time.
Yes.
So as I conclude, let me end where I began yesterday. 1.
Yes.
Never waste a crisis. 2. Self-interest prevails over national interest. Always.
Yes.
And 3, finally, politics is the art of maneuver warfare.
Yes.
Through maneuver warfare, Uhuru Kenyatta will break William Ruto's will to fight through agility and constant aggression that will shatter his cohesion and deprive him of any opportunity to reorganize himself and his forces.
Absolutely.
It will play before us like a movie. We're in a cinema, might as well be.
Absolutely, yes.
Right, we had a series of headlines here. I think we ought to give it to Daily Nation.
It does read very, very
Does
well.
read.
Woman of first, it reads well, and Ms. K, you did it justice.
Yes, and
So
absolutely. And the star field, I mean, we have had such a paradigm shift. For the first
Yes.
time, you will not
Online.
be lining up at the RB house to get a title deed or to look for your title deed. You just do it from your phone. I mean, it's as easy as that. And then that editor, the star.
I just decided to kill a brilliant
Is
story.
that how you package a story?
This guys, we should take him back to school. So I'm going to toss the Star and the Standard.
Very fast.
We're going to give the winning headline to the Daily Nation. And onto the cartoons, political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. We've got a 3-part criteria that we used to judge them. Are they humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective or just plain lazy? What have we got in the Standard?
The Standard, you have President Biden, and he's addressing, I don't know who's addressing, but he's saying, today we recognize the Armenian genocide of 1915 to 1918. And he's addressing people in a gravesite, the graveyard, and right there is a plaque, commemorative plaque, and say 200 million Native American killed by Christianist European invaders, 14th century, and the grave is saying, ahem, hello, I'm here. I mean, can you not commemorate me? But I think Gado should have added a tombstone there that read Kiamba 2008. Yes. Women and children killed.
I think the point there was that he was trying to say that America is commemorating obscure genocides, but I think that the implication, I would like to say that every life is valuable, even those of Kiamba.
Very clever rebuttal.
Okay, now, do we want to keep that or toss that?
Can we just
toss it?
Toss all of them?
Toss that guy, okay. So, this should be the Daily Nation. We have a caricature here of President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga attempting to push a red hatchback mini car that has no ties towards the referendum road, the path that leads us to referendum. Instead of ties, it has the big book chunks of BBI, and it's really hit a snag. And the cartoon here is continuing to play on the issues that BBI has been facing over the last 2 weeks.
Does Ndula think BBI is a small Mini Cooper?
Yes, Mini Cooper. I was thinking about Mini Morris, but I don't know if it's still called Mini Morris.
I mean, shame on Ndula. I mean,
toss it on toxic negativity.
Yeah. So we have no winning cartoon, but we do have a winning headline from the Daily Nation. And now, on to our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So what is our final thought?
And now our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled Into Africa, The Epic Adventures of Stanley and Livingstone by Martin Dugard.
This week, the theme this week is Extraordinary Voyages, and today we're looking at the quest by Henry Morton Stanley, an American journalist, to find England's most celebrated explorer, David Livingstone, who had vanished in Africa on an expedition to find the source of the River Nile. So following the American Civil War, a rift had developed between America and Great Britain over some issues such as the sinking of the British-built warship Alabama, some fishing rights in Newfoundland, and the US plan to make Canada part of the Union. Well, James Gordon Bennett, a cunning editor of the New York Herald, saw the public interest in this tension between America and Britain as a means to boost the circulation of his paper. Specifically, he hoped to exploit the fame and mystery surrounding the British explorer, Dr. David Livingstone, who'd been missing in Africa for a very long time. So while Britain acknowledged and recognized the achievements of Dr. Livingstone in mapping the unknown African continent, the government had been apathetic about rescuing him. So Bennett decided that the Americans would do what the British could not. So he ordered Henry Morton Stanley, a newcomer to the Herald, to lead an expedition to the African wilderness to find the explorer. Or, in the alternative, to bring back all possible proofs that the explorer was dead.
A very fascinating account here of these two men. Now, I will trace the journey towards Ojiji. Ojiji, we are told, is the site of the famous meeting on the 10th of November 1871, where Henry Stanley found Dr. David Livingstone and repeatedly uttered the famous words, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume." Livingstone, whom many thought dead as no news had been heard of him for several years, was found in Ujiji. Ujiji is the oldest town in western Tanzania. The route to Ujiji was a treacherous one. So let me paint a picture of the last 100 miles towards this town that Henry Stanley took with his caravan. The caravan had to endure all sorts of hardship. First was the blazing sun and the heat of this part of the world. Then the hilly terrain of western Tanganyika, the lack of food, the belligerent African warring tribes, and of course marauding predators, which is what I found most chilling. So here are two chilling encounters narrated to us by the author. On the first day, having left Tabora is also somewhere in Tanzania, the author tells us that a leopard attacked one of the donkeys on the caravan. It leapt from a place of camouflage and dug its fangs into the donkey's neck. Now, leopards are known to be fierce fighters, preferring to press an attack rather than back down. But the donkeys brayed so loudly in panic that the leopard fled.
Yes.
It chickened out.
Yeah.
They dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
But that night, the big cats came back.
Yeah.
No sooner had the expeditioners built a fire and protective fencing of thorn bushes around the camp that evening than a pride of lions surrounded them.
Whoa.
All night long, their low growls shook the camp. Stanley's team of 45 barely slept that night, but they survived. Now, to get to Ujiji, they had to cross a river, River Malagarasi.
Yes.
Also somewhere in Tanzania. I didn't know about all this. I was getting an education this morning.
Yes.
With the help of the locals. So Stanley, who obviously wasn't thinking very straight, chose to test the waters with his favorite donkey. The author tells us that Stanley chose Simba, his favorite donkey, to attempt a crossing. And halfway across, Simba was attacked on the throat by a swarm of crocodiles. They appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah.
The author recounts the event thus. Even as Stanley's men fought to drag Simba across the river, the crocodiles clamped down hard on the donkey's face and neck, then dragged it under. Simba, we're told, never kicked its way back to the surface and never fought free of the crocodiles. That night they rested, or what they saw from that night is to rest a few hours until the off-peak time to then continue the crossing when the crocodiles were taking their afternoon siesta. They chose the wrong time. They chose to cross,
Peak hours.
Peak hours, peak hunting,
Oh my God.
not very smart.
Yeah.
So soon thereafter then, they all managed to cross unharmed. But the caravan, we're told, couldn't help but feel an uncharacteristic wave of sadness that night to have lost Simba. But by the next morning, the melancholy mood had vanished, and Stanley received confirmation after they crossed river that there was a white man in Ujiji.
You know, I have to say this. I think we benefited from having a journalist being sent on this expedition because he had a flair for the dramatic.
Oh, he did. He could really, he told the story in a lot of drama.
Absolutely. But I also want to ask another question.
Oh,
Why call a donkey Simba if it's not going to fight?
right. Doesn't make sense.
Now, I want to give you guys more context as to how Stanley met Livingstone. Now, on March 21st, 1871, Henry Morton Stanley set out from the African port of Bagamoyo, now in Tanzania, on what he hoped would be a career-making adventure. The guy was only 30 years when he arrived on the dark continent at the behest of the New York Herald newspaper. His mission was a daunting one. He had been pleased to be in charge of a grand expedition to find explorer David Livingstone, who had vanished in the heart of Africa several years earlier, as Ms. K had pointed out. Despite never setting foot in Africa before, he assembled a caravan of 100 porters and struck into the unknown. Wherever Livingstone is, be sure I shall not give up the chase, he later told the New York Herald. If alive, you shall hear what he has to say. If dead, I will find him and bring his bones to you. That's what he told his boss. Dr. Livingstone was the most renowned of all explorers in Africa. Among other exploits, the Scottish missionary and abolitionist had survived the lion attack, charted the Zambezi River, and walked from one side of the continent to another. In 1865, he had embarked on what was supposed to be his last and greatest expedition, a quest to locate the fabled source of the Nile River. His mission was supposed to last 2 years. Yet by 1871, nearly 6 years had passed with only a few scattered updates on Livingstone's whereabouts. Many people had given up on him, and some thought he was dead. Stanley knew that Livingstone had last been spotted in the vicinity of Lake Tanganyika, but reaching the area proved to be a monumental task. It was no mean feat. Stanley himself was ravaged by dysentery and smallpox and a near fatal case of cerebral malaria. Yet he continued to urge his party forward at breakneck pace.
Yeah.
By the time they were arriving at Ujiji, like Jeremy said, a remote village in what is now Tanzania, they had crossed over 700 miles of territory. You know, so at Ujiji, they had rumors that there was a white guy who was living there. Now, on November 1871, Stanley put on his Sunday best.
Yes, he did, by the way.
Yeah, and he went to confirm if the intel was true. And sure enough, when Stanley got the rumored location, he saw a sickly Modongo. He approached, extended his hand, and asked the famous question JB just said, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" When the stranger answered in the affirmative, Stanley let out a sigh of relief. "I thank God, doctor, I have been permitted to see you." Livingstone was in bad shape. Man had been languishing in the heart of Africa for several years. His Nile expedition had been beset by fever and mass desertion by his porters, and a succession of tropical diseases had sapped his strength and forced him to travel with Arab slave traders. He was wasting away in a small hut. When asked if he wanted to return back home, Livingstone refused. He still wanted to explore further. So Stanley replenished the man's stock, and on March 1872, Livingstone continued this journey across Africa. Unfortunately, his illness later caught up with him, and he died from malaria and dysentery on May 1st, 1873. When Stanley traveled back home, he penned a best-selling book titled How I Found Livingstone. A year later, after being inspired by the man he went to find 2 years earlier, he made up his mind to continue with Livingstone's exploratory exploit. What a story, guys.
It is a very, very interesting story.
And there's something about, you know, I was telling someone earlier this morning that we say that when we criticize explorers and the Brits and the colonialists for them traveling through Africa and saying, oh, we discovered this, we discovered this. As Africans never went anywhere. We just stuck through, you know, stuck in our land of plenty, and we were happy to eat mangoes and drink water from the river.
Two things I'd like to say. One, to counter your argument. Okay, no, first, to agree with you, there is something very important and very interesting and very aspirational about explorers. That desire to strike out and go outside of your comfort zone, outside of your land, and find something or some place that you don't know and encounter and endure the trials and tribulations you find. That is very, very interesting and admirable. On the part of Africans never exploring, I would like to counter you right here and tell you that Africans did explore, though our history has been negated. Let me give you one example, a single example. And I think this has been quoted by Cheikh Anta Diop. Please, Kevo, read a book.
Kevo. Don't make the doubts.
Read a book. I will say this. Cheikh Anta Diop has quoted, and they have looked at the remains of the pharaohs to try and determine what they ate and know how they lived. And one of the things that was found inside the stomachs, because I mean they are very well, preserved, is tobacco. Now, tobacco was only discovered when the Spaniards crossed the great unknown and entered into what is now known as South America. That is where they found tobacco. At that point, they thought that they were the first people to arrive on this newfound land. But the Africans, in their tombs, already dead for years, had been smoking tobacco for years. That tells you one thing, that the Africans, with all our lack of knowledge, had crossed that same ocean and had discovered that land first before them. Maybe what we are not good at is telling our stories.
Let me tell you, I think you'd have read another book, and I actually thought your point was the African was the original man.
Oh, definitely, he was the original man.
Yeah, if he was the original man, and then we multiplied ourselves everywhere across the world, I thought that was your point.
No, definitely, we multiplied ourselves, but our point here was not about being first in being there. Our point was being first in exploring.
Your point is zero. JM, please close the show.
Wonderful, wonderful. No. Those points, actually, you guys are saying the same thing. You know, we were the first civilization and the first explorers.
Absolutely. If Ms. K was telling me that the original man came from Turkana and found his way up to South America and found his way up to Europe, and the world was one place before tectonic plates shifted our place.
That is
the story. But now you're telling me about tobacco and the silk and everything.
That's a nice, we live for the story.
Let's close the show. Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation. We didn't have a winning cartoon. Before we close, I'd like to end with a quote by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, a Supreme Court judge in the United States. And he said, the young man knows the rules, but the old man knows the exceptions. Congratulations once again to our incoming Chief Justice. May she be confirmed. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we are also on your TV screens. Don't forget, we are on Pan Free to Air, Great TV and Star Times. Have a good evening.